Chapter 11. Securing the Loyalty of the Khalasar. Hidden mission completed. Defeat a Dothraki horde and take over the Khalisar as the new Khal. Rewards: X500 Destrier war horses. New world development. Summoning the Mayor have alerted this world's gods and various other magic forces to the presence of foreign forces within this world. Any more summoning of magical persons will raise more suspicions and potentially draw these forces into direct conflict. New mission received. Maintain balance. Do not provoke the gods or the magic forces. Summoning only non-magical entities is advised for the time being. Time frame: 5 years. Rewards: none. Sitting within his tent, Maximus was analyzing this new information that he had just received from the system. This newfound information was surprising to say the least. To know that there are actually gods within the world was shocking, since he never knew or read about actual gods being in God. Besides the many religions that worship gods and the implications that there were beings a long time ago that may have been gods, he didn't think that they were real in this time period of the world. But now that he knew, he would need to tread careful, since while the system warned him about summoning magical entities to this world, he still needed to be wary of the other magical forces of the world, such as the Red Priests and the House of Black and White. As he was lost in thought, making adjustments to his future plans, Olorin had walked into his tent and bowed his head slightly. "My lord," he greeted. "The Dothraki are surprisingly well behaved, even though just yesterday we killed their Khal." Olorin had been curious about the Dothraki culture and had done some investigating by observing the Dothraki to better understand them. "Well, mostly there are a few Dothraki who are dissatisfied with this new arrangement, and I have reason to believe that they might try something if they get the chance," informed Olorin. Hearing this, an idea popped up in Maximus's head. Similar to how Daenerys got the Dothraki to be fiercely loyal to her, he thought to do the same thing to make them loyal to him. From what he knew, fire is highly revered in Dothraki culture. So, when Daenerys emerged unharmed from the burning Dosh Khaleen temple, it shows the Dothraki that she has the favor and protection of the powerful Dothraki deity, the Great Stallion. By utilizing this information, Maximus could create a scenario where he emerged from within fire to make Dothraki believe that he had the favor and protection of the Great Stallion. "Actually, we could use them to our advantage," responded Maximus, as Olorin had become curious as to what he had in mind. The Dothraki religion is a major influence in their culture and will be the main factor in securing their loyalty. The easiest way to use their religion is by setting up a display of divine favor. "We shall use those who don't like me as their call to start a bonfire, one large enough to be seen for miles. While it blazes, I shall emerge unscathed from it, demonstrating that the Great Stallion has blessed me." Within his head, the scene of him emerging from the fire was playing, and he knew that it was a sure way to secure their loyalty. "A masterful scheme indeed," he admitted. "And I'm assuming that you will need my help, as you don't have any resistance to fire?" asked Olorin. "Indeed. I hope that you have something to protect me while I am within the fire." "Yes, I do have a spell that can create a barrier of protection around you," Olorin replied. "For a short time the fire won't have any effect on you, but make sure to not stay in the fire too long, or I might have to come save you and spoil your plan." "Duly noted," Maximus replied with a small grin. For the next few hours, Maximus had decided to go over his current situation with Olorin and plan their next steps. As of now, he has a total of about 40k Dothraki whom he took from the previous call. About 5k of them are Dothraki riders, while the rest are women, children, elderly, and slaves. He had plans to eventually free the slaves, but right now the Dothraki don't see him as their leader, nor does he have enough authority over them to simply free all the slaves. Once he conquered more Khalasars and eventually united the Dothraki, then he would free the slaves. Once night had arrived, the plan had begun. Olorin cast illusions on the Dothraki, who didn't like Maximus making them believe that he was a threat to their traditions and would bring ruin to their way of life. They were filled with rage, accusing Maximus of crimes against their culture and insulting the Great Stallion. The malcontents, fueled by Olorin's carefully crafted illusions, had stealthily made their way towards Maximus's tent. For the plan to proceed, the guards around Maximus's tent were sent away, leaving Maximus alone inside of his tent. Once they arrived at the tent and found no guards, they started to set the place ablaze. Olorin cast the illusion that they had one of their pots of burning oil with them and used it to set the tent on fire. Slowly the fire spread as the wood and structural integrity of the tent started to fail. The fire grew brighter, which attracted a lot of attention from the camp, as people started to gather around the tent to see what was going on. Maximus's army was confused and worried that their lord's tent was set ablaze, Some even tried to enter the tent and save Maximus, but Alarin had made the fire grow even more as they got closer. Inside, Maximus was standing in the middle of the tent, prepared to emerge from the tent after a few more seconds had passed. Once that time passed, he readied himself and emerged from the tent where everybody could see him. Alarin had cast an illusion spell on Maximus to make it appear like his clothes were tattered and burned from the fire, which managed to fool everybody present. Seeing Maximus walk out of the burning tent unscathed, a gasp spread through the crowd. The ferocious flames that had devoured the tent seemed to dance around Maximus, creating an almost ethereal halo of fire around him. Stepping away from the blazing remains of his tent, Maximus stood tall in front of the crowd of people, his face illuminated by the burning fire. There was an eerie silence in the camp as all eyes were fixated on him. Fear, awe, and respect filled their expressions. In their eyes, he was no longer just a call. This showing proved that he was chosen and blessed by the great stallion. A murmur of disbelief rolled through the crowd, and then a solitary figure fell to his knees in reverence. It was one of the malcontents, who had set fire to Maximus's tent earlier. Struck by fear and awe, he bowed his head low to the ground before Maximus. Then, like a wave sweeping across the sands, others started to kneel as well. From the strongest warrior to the most delicate slave, every individual present fell into submission before this miraculous spectacle. His soldiers did the same thing, seeing their lord emerge from fire unscathed. A small smile appeared across his face as his plan proved to be successful. Now he was on to the next phase of his plan, which involved uniting the Dothraki under him. Chapter 12: Rise of the New Khal. A week had passed since Maximus's plan was successful. The Dothraki had become fiercely loyal to him and saw him as their divine leader, the chosen one of the great stallion. The malcontents who had once conspired against him were now his most fervent supporters. Maximus, with Alarin and Ianwe by his side, began setting his other plans into motion. First, he ensured that all Dothraki under his command understood that he was not just a new leader, but a revolutionary one. He made it known that he intended to change their way of life forever, to bring about a civilization unlike anything the Dothraki had ever known before. He will defeat all the other Khals and become the sole ruler of the Dothraki. From what he knew about the world, Westeros had a population of about 40 million people living across the entire continent, while Essos, west of the mountains, had about 42 million people living within it. The Dothraki Sea itself had about 4 million people, which was a bit more than he expected, but then again, the Dothraki Sea was vast, and the hordes were many. Right now, he has 40k Dothraki followers, and most of them were children, women, elderly, and slaves. The 5k, which were former Dothraki riders under the previous call, had become riders for Maximus, giving him a total of 5k cavalry, who can shoot arrows from horseback and are vicious fighters even on foot. He started organizing the horde into several organized groups based on their skills and specialties. Each group was given specific tasks and roles to maintain order and efficiency within the Khalasar. Maximus did not want to rule an aimless, mindless horde. He wanted an organized force capable of changing not just their own culture, but that of the entire world. Each group was led by 5 lawbringers who maintained order over their respective group and would make reports to Maximus if anything needed his attention. Next, he set out to expand his reach. He led his followers towards other Khalasars with the intention to unite them under him. As he ventured further into the Dothraki Sea, the first encounter that he had was with a small Khalasar consisting of 15k Dothraki riders with 30k women, children, and elderly. Their Khal was a tough man named Jorro who was not easily swayed by words alone. Maximus had around 10k soldiers with 5k being Dothraki riders, but numbers alone wouldn't allow Khal Jorro to win the battle, as he had both Alarin and Ianwe on his side. Instead of straight-up attacking, Maximus asked for a parley. He knew the Dothraki valued strength and courage more than anything else. So, he challenged Khal Jorro to a duel to show his strength and convince his Khalasar to follow his lead. Khal Jorro, being challenged like this by some foreign Khal, had no choice but to show his Khalasar that he was stronger than this foreign Khal, and to show Maximus what it was like to face a Khal. Under the hot sun of the vast grasslands, Maximus and Jorro faced each other on horseback. Maximus didn't need his sword to deal with Jorro, so he used one of the Dothraki weapons, a curved arak, to fight Khal Jorro. The tension hung heavy in the air as they circled each other, each waiting for their opponent to make the first move. With a fierce yell, Jorro charged at Maximus. His arak swung down with all his might, aiming for Maximus' shoulder. But Maximus deftly parried his attack and retaliated with a quick slash at Jorro's side. The Khal quickly pivoted his horse to the side, narrowly escaping the blade. Yet Maximus didn't stop there. With a fluid motion, he turned the parry into a full swing, aiming towards Joro's unprotected back. Joro managed to turn just in time to block the attack with his own arak. With each passing second, Maximus's popularity grew among the Dothraki. He was not just a foreigner with illusions of grandeur, but a formidable opponent who could hold his own against one of their calls. At last, when he saw an opening in Joro's defense, Maximus lunged. His arak found its target on Joro's side before the call could react. Joro let out a loud groan and fell from his horse onto the grassy plain. Maximus dismounted his horse and approached the fallen call. He tossed aside his arak, placing his foot on Joro's chest to keep him down. His victory was clear and undisputed. Delivering the finishing blow, Maximus turned towards the crowd and raised his arak in the air with a loud scream. With call, Joro defeated his Khalasar, had joined Maximus, recognizing his victory over their former call. Now he had a formidable army of 25,000 loyal men who were prepared to fight for him. Word quickly spread among the other Khalasars about the foreign call who had managed to take over 2 Khalasars and combine them into one under his leadership. His newly assembled force, now filled with a sense of unity and purpose, set off once again into the vast Dothraki Sea. Tales of a foreign call leading an unparalleled army spread across the plains like wildfire, carried by desert winds and whispered by traders passing through the area. Day by day, the Khalasar grew in numbers as more calls either fell before Maximus or willingly joined him in his mission to unite the nomadic people. His fame was growing, and so was his influence. Some calls surrendered without fighting, awed by the rumors of him being blessed by the great stallion. For months passed since Maximus had started his journey of unification. The once 40,000 followers had surged to an impressive 200,000, sprawling across the grasslands of the Dothraki Sea like a living river. It was a sight to behold. Thousands of tents sprawled across the sea like dots on a painter's canvas, each one housing Dothraki who had pledged their loyalty to Maximus. With this massive number of people, Maximus was making plans to move them towards the location where they would build their city. They needed a place that was near water and was a good location to build a city. Alarin, Ianwi, and Maximus had spent days before they settled on the ruined city of New York Sar. New York Sar, once a bustling city of the Valyrian freehold, was now but a whisper of its former glory. The structures of olden days lay in ruins, overgrown with the tenacious flora native to the region. The mighty Roine River, once the lifeblood of the city, still flowed nearby, providing a much-needed source of water. When the bristling Khalasar arrived at the deserted city, Maximus rode forth alone. He dismounted his horse at the banks of the river and reached down to touch the clear, flowing water. Maximus turned back and raised his arms. "This is it," he shouted. "The place where we begin anew. New York Sar shall rise from its ashes. We will make it our own." His declaration echoed through the remains of New York Sar, and soon the air was filled with triumphant roars from his followers. They set up camp just outside the city while Maximus rode some distance away to summon some people from the system. The first person who he summoned was a master builder, 400 system points, who would be in charge of constructing the city. Next, he summoned 400 stonemasons and 200 carpenters, which cost a total of 9,000 system points to construct the city. Each stonemason and carpenter would teach the Dothraki their knowledge, increasing the number of people that will work on constructing the city. The stonemasons and carpenters that he summoned before were working for Aaron and building more taverns in each of the free cities and a few places in Westeros. He had already sent Faraday to inform Aaron to start delivering the necessary supplies that they would need for constructing the city. They had been preparing for this moment, so they had enough funds, and with the Dothraki being fiercely loyal to him, he also had a free workforce. Slowly but surely, he was transforming the Dothraki under him into a more proper people and kept parts of their culture but also changed a few things. It was easy to do with the use of magic and using the name of the Great Stallion to enforce these changes. Going back to New York Sar, Maximus had started organizing the Dothraki into various groups that will learn under the leadership of the carpenters and stonemasons. The construction wasn't planned to start until the next day, so for the night, a feast was organized, and a grand celebration was put on. Maximus got some pristine meat from the system for 200 points, which made a few of the Dothraki bow down in reverence because of how good it tasted. Maximus simply told them that it was horse meat granted to them by the Great Stallion himself. They believed this and started to spread that news around the camp. Once they were gone, Maximus looked over his own sketch of the city that he had planned to construct. The size was grand, and its design would dwarf that of any current city present. City image here. System information. Points remaining, 14,150. Current active missions, quests, and world developments. Quest: find and claim a location for your empire's capital city. Will be completed next chapter. Rewards: 20k system points, x 1,000 stonemasons, x 500 carpenters. Quest: defeat all the Dothraki hordes to increase your population and bring an end to the nomadic barbarians. Rewards: 40k system points, x 1 dragon, x 10 wyverns. World development: summoning the mayor have alerted this world's gods and various other magic forces to the presence of foreign forces within this world. Any more summoning of magical persons will raise more suspicions and potentially draw these forces into direct conflict. Mission: maintain balance. Do not provoke the gods or the magic forces. Summoning only non-magical entities is advised for the time being. Time frame: 5 years. Rewards: none. Chapter 13, Progress. Maximus envisioned a city that not only held grand structures and sprawling marketplaces, but also wide-open areas for horses to roam freely, and homage to the Dothraki's nomadic roots. There would be an expansive arena, a place for combat and feasts alike, mirroring V's Dothrak's Dashkaleen. His plans also included proper fortifications, something the Dothraki weren't accustomed to, but under his leadership were learning its importance. Stone walls would surround their city, tall watchtowers would rise above the skyline, a clear sign of their power and resilience. For him, a grand palace would be constructed on one of the many coastlines as its own separate area from the rest of the city. Around the palace would be its own waterway with bridges that connected the main city to the palace. The palace itself would sit atop a hill with the surrounding area being barracks for soldiers, important characters, and buildings for throwing feasts and such. Outside of the city would be farmlands, barracks, and more houses for people to live in. Of course, all of this was not going to be completed within 5 years. The city would continue to be under construction for the years to come but will be able to support a population of well over 5 million people. There would be a stadium for horse racing / fighting among other entertaining activities which would become a good way for the Dothraki to entertain themselves and still hold on to their ancient customs. Separate from that would be another arena just for fighting. It would be located near the eastern gate of the city and be one of the first places that people see when they enter the city. The city would be called Heaven's Reach, a name that captured both the ambition of its creator and the awe-inspiring vastness of the great grass sea it overlooked. Maximus's vision for Heaven's Reach was not merely as a city, but as a beacon for the birth of a new civilization. A hub for commerce, culture, and community to thrive. The city would have districts dedicated to trades, arts, academia, faith, and more, each one meticulously planned and organized to support the people. Construction began at the dawn of the next day. Scores of Dothraki, under the guidance of stonemasons and carpenters, delved into their tasks with fervor. The once abandoned ruins of New York Sar started to buzz with concrete action as plans started taking physical form. He had also completed one of his quests. Quest completed. Find and claim a location for your empire's capital city. Rewards: 20k system points, x 1,000 stonemasons, x 500 carpenters. The work continued like this for a week before Maximus set off with 30,000 men to conquer the rest of the Dothraki Khalasars and become the sole Khal in charge of the Dothraki. There was still close to 4 million Dothraki enslaved left for him to conquer within the Dothraki Sea. So together with Olerin he took his army back into the Dothraki Sea, leaving behind a garrison of 20,000 warriors and Eonwe to protect the city should an attack happen. The journey was long, stretching on for days that turned into weeks. They traversed the vast Dothraki Sea, riding through the plains during the day, camping beneath the vast sky at night. Each week brought with it fresh encounters with various Khalasars who had heard of Maximus's growing power and were not pleased with him calling himself a self-proclaimed Khal. For Maximus this was perfect since he didn't want to leave any Khals left alive to challenge his authority. Each confrontation with the standing Khals was met with fierce battle cries and galloping horses, an orchestra of war that echoed across the sea. For every Khal that resisted, there was merciless retribution. Maximus chose not to kill them immediately, but instead challenged them to a duel in front of their followers. He would then best them in combat, showcasing his strength and dominance. As they continued their conquests, word spread like wildfire across the Dothraki Sea about the rising power of Maximus, the self-proclaimed Khal who was uniting all Khals under his rule. His reputation preceded him, and there were even tales of smaller Khalasars submitting without battle at his approach. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, King Aerys II had showed a slight improvement in terms of his health as well as his sister queen, Rhaella Targaryen. Although he still acted like his former self, he had become more rational and less prone to sudden outbursts of madness. The pyromaniacs were still under his employ, but they were no longer given free rein to ignite their wildfire wherever they pleased. A small improvement, but a significant one, nonetheless. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen had also become a behemoth with the vigor that he had gained from Maximus's potions. Faraday had already established a branch of the Shadowhand within King's Landing and infiltrated the Red Keep. Faraday had also used this to keep Maximus in contact with the king, who wanted to grant Maximus a reward for what he had done for the royal family. The king's reward came in the form of an official invitation to serve as an honored advisor within the royal court, an intriguing proposal that Maximus considered. Yet Maximus knew he needed to tread carefully. Accepting such a role would inevitably draw attention and scrutiny from those already nestled within the tangled web of court politics. The king's main motivation for this was because of the stories he was hearing from Varys about Maximus in Essos. He had taken over dozens of Khalasars and was becoming a rising power within Essos. On top of his potions, King Aerys wanted to secure Maximus as a potential ally, as the current year, 282 AC, which had just started, had made him see that a potential rebellion might happen soon enough. And if that happened, he would need more of those potions to win the war. If Maximus was in King's Landing, then he might have forced him to take up the position, but since he was across the narrow sea in Essos, there wasn't much he could do. Already things were taking a turn for the worse. He had just found out that his son had disappeared with Lyanna Stark, which he knew would cause problems from the north. But he wasn't worried, since if they dared to do anything, then he would just burn them all. Faraday, on the other hand, didn't just establish himself in King's Landing, but also spread out to other major cities of the major houses of Westeros. He had personally met with various lords and ladies in secret while using the excuse of delivering more potions to meet with them. He had established various contacts and created various relationships with many of them, gaining him some valuable pawns to use. He was already aware of the situation that was happening in Westeros and of the impending war, and had already informed Maximus about. The reply that he got was a list of names upon which he was to make sure are constantly watched and protected, and when needed they are to be saved from any dangers. The list wasn't long, but it was filled with some names who he already recognized as major chess pieces on his board. He made sure that each person on the list was constantly watched and their location was always known. Back in Essos, Aeron had expanded the pub business a great deal. Now there were more than 3 pubs in each city bringing in money, 8 caravans constantly moving between the free cities, and 2 trade fleets which had about 40 ships for each fleet. The organization was named the Silver Serpent Trading Company and had the logo of a serpent placed on everything it owned. The Silver Serpent Trading Company had grown to such an extent that it had become a staple in the economies of the free cities. The employees of the company were well paid, and it was already known that if you worked for the Silver Serpent, then you were set for life. Though this also caused problems for some workers, since if they could be robbed by bandits and thieves, since it was known that they had money, and there weren't enough guards in each city to protect the workers without risking the pub. In response, Aeron contracted local sellswords and mercenaries to protect the pubs and their workers in each city. In addition to that, the Silver Serpent Trading Company continued to flourish. They started manufacturing their own goods, thereby reducing the cost of importing from other cities. They set up textile mills, blacksmithing shops, and started training people in various trades under expert guidance. The free cities began to see them not just as a trading company but as an economic powerhouse that was majorly contributing to their increased prosperity. Chapter 14, The Masked Man. 2 months later, within the Dothraki Sea, Maximus's power continued to grow. He now had a massive army of 100,000 men and secured the loyalty of more than 500,000 Dothraki, who he sent back to Heaven's Reach to start contributing to the construction of the city. His campaign of unification, while brutal, was undeniably effective. Smaller Khalasars stood no chance against his own. Even the largest Khalasar had no chance of beating him, forcing many of them to join him without fighting. The calls of said Khalasars still dueled Maximus so that he can show his strength in front of his newly acquired warriors. Stories had already traveled not only through the Dothraki Sea but spilled into the free cities as well. The self-proclaimed Khal was gradually becoming a legend. However, during one battle, something unforeseen happened. He was fighting against a Khalasar who refused to join him, but during the battle he received a warning from the system. Warning! Outside interference detected. New quest. Survive the battle. Rewards? Before Maximus could fully process the warning, an arrow whistled through the air. He managed to deflect it, but more followed, raining from the sky in a deadly hailstorm. He quickly realized these weren't ordinary arrows. They were surrounded by a mysterious green flame. Shields were raised and horses whinnied in terror as the fiery rain descended upon them. Maximus tightened his grip on his mount, giving out orders amidst the chaos. The Dothraki who didn't use shields were at a disadvantage as their bodies were pierced by these strange arrows. Using his sword, he had cut down arrow after arrow, which emboldened his army after many of them died by the unforeseen attack. They had charged forward together alongside him over the dead bodies of both their comrades and their enemy. The barrage of arrows had not only killed some of his men but also that of the enemies. As he was riding forward towards the enemy who were attempting to flee, he had seen a group of rogue riders emerge, their faces concealed by masks. Leading them was a man whose stature towered above the rest. He rode forward, brandishing a weapon Maximus had never seen before, a blazing whip that danced like dragon fire. Olorin had appeared next to him just as the masked man's whip flew through the air like a fiery serpent. The soldier behind Maximus took the brunt of the whip, falling from his horse with a loud cry. "Archers!" Maximus commanded, his voice cutting through the sounds of battle. An immediate volley of arrows shot towards the masked group, but they moved like shadows, swiftly dodging with unnatural speed. "My lord, I think these might be forces far powerful than anything we have encountered before," said Olorin, observing the masked men. Maximus nodded his head, agreeing with what Olorin said. He had received a warning from the system about outside interference. The only logical thing he could think of was one of the magical forces, hidden within the background of the world, had interfered with his battle or perhaps seen him as a threat. The masked man had drove his horse forward as he slashed through the air towards Maximus, killing anybody in his way. However, Maximus was ready. With a swift sidestep on his horse, he evaded the strike and countered with a ferocious swing of his own sword. However, to Maximus's surprise, the masked man deflected it effortlessly and struck back immediately. This was no ordinary enemy. Olorin had started fighting the group of other masked riders while still keeping an eye on Maximus. He knew his lord could handle himself, but this was no ordinary adversary they were dealing with. Part of the battle felt like a dance of death where every misstep meant mortality. The clashing of steel reverberated through the air, punctuated by the screams of men and horses alike. The enemy was agile, and his strength seemed to match that of Maximus. The fire whip left nothing but ashes in its path. Maximus grunted as the masked man pushed him back with a strong kick. His horse reared up in fear, nearly forcing him off of his horse. But Maximus held on, his grip never weakening. He counterattacked with a powerful sideways swipe which the masked man narrowly escaped. The clash between Maximus and the masked man intensified. With his dragon-like whip and agility, he moved with a precision that defied ordinary combat. Maximus's blade cut through the air, meeting the masked man's whip. The fire whip sizzled around Maximus's sword, its flames dangerously close to his skin. The masked man's eyes glowed through the slits of his mask, showing that he was indeed not a normal person. Maximus's thoughts raced. He needed to adapt quickly. The masked man was clearly a formidable foe, potentially enhanced by whatever magical forces were at play. His conventional tactics might not suffice. As his mind was elsewhere, the masked man had managed to make a swift move and was about to land an attack directly against Maximus. He didn't have enough time to block with his sword, so the only choice he had was to use his arm. As the whip wrapped around his arm, he screamed out in pain as it began to burn the entirety of his left arm. Even though he was in pain, Maximus still spotted the opportunity that had just appeared right in front of him. Not worrying about the safety of his arm, Maximus used all his strength and pulled the masked man off his horse, forcing him onto the ground. At the same time, he charged his horse forward, and as he got close, he jumped off, raising his sword in the air, hoping to deliver the finishing blow. The masked man barely managed to deflect the blow, but Maximus's strike was enough to cause him to stagger. Realizing that the fight might soon turn against him, the masked man let out a low growl. The ground around him seemed to shimmer with a faint, otherworldly light. At that moment, Olorin fought with equal ferocity against the other masked riders, his movements a blur as he fought through their ranks. He glanced towards Maximus, seeing that his lord was gaining the upper hand. Olorin charged through the remaining masked riders, his magic cleaving through their defenses as he made his way towards Maximus. The masked man, sensing the shifting balance of power, made a decisive move. He lashed his whip with one final, powerful strike, sending a wave of fire towards Maximus. The attack was intended to overwhelm him and end the fight in a blaze of fury. Maximus, eyes blazing with determination, lifted his sword in a desperate block. The heat of the fire whip seared against his armor, but he held his ground. His arm, which was burned from the previous attack, was still healing as he had to use it once again. However, this attack was more ferocious than the previous one and had caused him to fall unconscious. Olorin, who was behind the masked man, had delivered the finishing blow, causing his body to disappear entirely. After that, Olorin reached Maximus and started to cast healing magic on him, but he noticed that his wounds were already healing thanks to his super healing. With the masked man dead, the battle was basically over, so Olorin issued orders to the commanders to return to their camp while he teleported Maximus back to his tent so he can rest. Maximus had survived his first encounter with one of the few magical forces of this world, but this encounter was only a test conducted by the Great Stallion himself. Chapter 15. The Great Stallion. While Maximus was unconscious, his mind was placed in a dark space, and in front of him stood a giant figure, luminous and imposing. He didn't recognize the figure in front of him, but he could guess that what just happened to him was probably caused by the figure in front of him. Maximus, the figure spoke, his voice echoing in the vast emptiness as he extended his out hand. Your presence in this world hasn't gone unnoticed, at least for me. I can't speak for the other powerful deities and forces out there, but I have taken a keen interest in you. Why? Was all Maximus managed to ask. Because not only have you managed to unite a large portion of the Dothraki people, but you have also secured their loyalty by utilizing your understanding of their culture, which I find intriguing. At first, I was wondering what your intentions were, but now that I know, I am curious to see how you will transform the Dothraki from a nomadic people to a proper civilization, and how your rise in power will affect the rest of the world. The figure stated. Is this a test? Maximus asked, his voice echoing through the silent void. Am I being judged? The figure chuckled. Yes, indeed you are, and you have passed the test by defeating the masked man and his followers, proving to me that you are a capable warrior and leader, the figure added. Maximus narrowed his eyes. What do you want from me? I do not desire anything from you, Maximus. I am merely a god for the Dothraki people, whom I mainly leave to their own affairs until somebody like you comes along to disrupt their way of life. I offer you but a proposal, Maximus. You continue to guide the Dothraki towards evolution, and I shall grant you my blessing. Decline, and you will be left to your own devices with the other forces of the world. The figure stated in a tone that was neither a threat nor a promise, but something in between. Maximus considered his words carefully. He had not come this far just to turn back now. With a heavy sigh, he nodded. I accept. A chuckle echoed through the void as the figure lifted its hand, and a light enveloped Maximus. When next you wake, the figure said, his voice resonating through the light, you'll find my power within you. Use it wisely, Maximus. And then darkness swallowed him whole. When Maximus woke up, he found himself back in his own tent, Olorin at his side. His body was already healed from the damage he had taken by the masked man. Olorin looked relieved. You gave us quite the scare, my lord. Maximus barely registered his words as he flexed his hand, feeling an unknown power coursing through his veins. As Maximus began to rise from his bed, Olorin rushed forward to support him. Take it easy, my lord. You've been unconscious for nearly a day. Maximus pulled away from him gently. I feel fine, Olorin. More than fine, really, he said, standing fully upright. Olorin took a few steps back, his eyes widening in awe as he glanced at Maximus. I believe our encounter with the masked man has resulted in something extraordinary, he muttered. Yes, indeed, Olorin, Maximus finally managed to say. I believe I've been blessed by the Great Stallion himself. His voice echoed with a latent power that sent shivers down Olorin's spine. Maximus walked towards the entrance of his tent, pushing aside the flaps to glance out into their encampment. The Dothraki men were busying themselves with their tasks, unaware of the drastic change their leader had undergone. He had completed the quest that he received during the battle but decided to look at it later. Meanwhile, within Westeros, things were starting to kick off as news of Prince Rhaegar's disappearance with Lyanna Stark spread. Whispers and rumors filled the halls of every castle, leaving a tension that lingered in the air like a heavy fog. Over in the north, Eddard Stark and his father, Lord Rickard Stark, were consumed by anger and concern over the sudden disappearance of their beloved Lyanna. The North would not let this slide. They understood the grave implications of Rhaegar's reckless action. In response, Lyanna's eldest brother, Brandon Stark, went to King's Landing and stood in front of the Red Keep threatening Prince Rhaegar's life. Though Rhaegar himself was not present, King Ares was, and he ordered Brandon's arrest. Brandon's father, Lord Ricard, was summoned to King's Landing in response to his son's actions. And in the trial that followed, both Brandon and Ricard were killed by order of King Ares with wildfire. However, King Ares wasn't satisfied with this and had sent a raven to Jon Arryn ordering him to send him the heads of both Eddard Stark and Robert Baratheon. But Jon Arryn refused, instead summoning his forces and raising his banners. The grand old man of the Vale had fostered both Eddard Stark and Robert Baratheon in his youth, and he would not willingly send their heads to the Mad King. This act of defiance was what sparked the fires of rebellion, a war that would come to be known as Robert's Rebellion. Outraged at his refusal, King Ares declared Jon Arryn a traitor. Robert Baratheon, who was betrothed to Lyanna Stark before her disappearance, joined forces with Jon Arryn, and thus the first alliances of the rebellion were formed. News spread quickly throughout Westeros. In Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister watched the unfolding chaos with cold anticipation. The lion was always ready to pounce. He knew when to bide his time and when to strike. For now he waited, his keen eyes observing all from within his fortress. The Reach stirred as well, House Tyrell whispering plans in secret gardens, while their fields bloomed with golden roses. Mace Tyrell held counsel with his most trusted advisors, his mother Olenna amongst them, plotting their course in this changing tide. Amidst all the chaos, the Iron Islands remained a seething cauldron of potential rebellion. The Greyjoys, with their stormy history and contentious relationship with the mainland, were always a wild card. Balon Greyjoy watched from his castle on Pike, his eyes filled with a savage glee. He saw in the mainland's turmoil the opportunity for his long-desired dream, independence for the Iron Islands. Yet he too knew better than to act hastily. He bided his time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike.